Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today I'm going to be reacting to every NFL game in Week 6. And I have to say right off the bat, I had my best week of the season thus far. I went 13-1. I only got one game wrong. It was the Thursday night game. So imagine if I would have just parlayed all my Sunday picks together. Kind of pissed at myself that I didn't do that. But yeah, had a really good week with the picks here, putting my season record at 61-38. So big week for me. And definitely stay tuned for either later tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to be putting out videos about the big trades we just had go down today. Obviously, the big one, Davante Adams traded to the Jets. There's a reason why I didn't just jump on here and do an instant reaction to that trade, because I have pretty mixed feelings on that trade. So I'm going to save all that for a video coming out shortly. And Amari Cooper was also traded as well to the Buffalo Bills, which I think is a massive deal. I think just as impactful, if not even more, than Davante going to the Jets. So we're going to talk about that in later videos. But like every week, we are going to react to the slate of games, kind of talk about the storylines coming out of these games. So going back to Thursday Night Football, this was, like I said earlier, the only game of the week that I got wrong between the Niners and the Seahawks. I did have Seattle in this one for a multitude of reasons. The 49ers, they've just had a very up and down season. They've been kind of inconsistent overall as a team. They've had their injury problems. I felt like they didn't have really any momentum after losing to the Cardinals, and you oppose that with Seattle. They were coming off a loss as well, but I feel like they had more momentum. They were at home. Geno Smith was playing really good leading up into that game. So that's why I went with Seattle in this one. I just felt like all the momentum was on their side. And I was actually contemplating betting big on this game, and I'm glad I didn't, because Seattle ended up losing. And I made a short about this game. I made kind of a reaction to it. And I think it's pretty clear why Seattle lost this game. They asked Geno Smith to do too much in this game. They had him throw 52 times. That is completely unacceptable. This is something we talk about, anytime these, B-level quarterbacks are asked to be Superman, it's always a disastrous recipe, because this isn't Josh Allen. This isn't Patrick Mahomes. This isn't Lamar. This is Geno Smith. He's a good quarterback. He can operate an offense efficiently, but whenever you ask him to put on a Superman cape, you're going to lose the game. And that's exactly why Seattle lost this game. They asked Geno to do too much. I don't get it, because it's not like Seattle has bad running backs. They have a really good, strong tandem of running backs between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. That's a really nice 1-2 punch. And I think Kenneth Walker only got I can't remember exactly how many carries, but it wasn't a whole lot. It was 11, I want to say. And you even had the head coach for Seattle, Mike Macdonald, saying a big thing about their offense was they wanted to start integrating Kenneth Walker more. And we even saw, even though they lost against the Lions, Kenneth Walker was incredible in that game against the Lions. So, to me, I don't understand that. Why are you only giving Kenneth Walker 11 carries or whatever it was in that game? I would feed him a lot more. Charbonnet, I would use him a lot more, because having Geno Smith throw the ball 50-plus times, you're going to lose that game every time. Anytime you ask Geno to do that much. And that was on full display. I don't know exactly what it is about the 49ers, but that's Geno Smith's kryptonite. He just cannot beat the 49ers. I wish I would have picked the Niners here, because I would have had a perfect week. But now let's move on to the Sunday slate of games. So obviously we had the London one. I actually got up to watch this one, whereas last week with the Vikings and Jets one, I did get up, but it was around halfway through the game, so I missed kind of the first half of the game. This one I actually got up to watch this entire game. And it was a fun watch from the standpoint of it's just fun to see the Bears kind of coming into their own. And we talked about this a little bit last week, but I really do believe the X factor for the Bears and why they're looking better, why their offense is looking a lot better, is the emergence of DeAndre Swift. He's really changed the complexity of this offense, because through the first 4 weeks of the season, you could argue DeAndre Swift was one of, if not the worst starting running back in the NFL. And I don't know what happened after that, but he's really, the last 3 games, he's been really good for the Bears, and that has completely changed the dynamic of their offense, because now Caleb Williams doesn't have to put on his Superman cape. He has, he has some help from DeAndre Swift, And, of course, Keenan Allen he was back last week, but they made it. They even said going into this game, we want Keenan Allen to be a focal point of this offense. And I feel like Caleb was really in certain spots forcing the ball to Keenan Allen. I don't have a problem with that, trying to integrate your great veteran receiver back into this offense. He had 2 touchdowns. Cole Kmet had 2 touchdowns. So, overall, I like to see this stuff, because I did pick the Bears as a playoff team. It looked kind of rough early on. I still don't know if they're going to make it now just because of how good that division is, but the Bears are starting to look like a competent team. My biggest problem with the Bears going into this year, I gave them a lot of credit for their roster and their talent and obviously the upside of Caleb. My biggest problem was the coaching staff. I didn't trust Eberflus. I didn't trust Shane Waldron going into this season, and I was kind of honestly surprised that they chose to keep Matt Eberflus going into this season, but they did. And it looks like he's at least a competent head coach. He can at least run his side of the ball. Their defense has been pretty good this year. And like we said, with their offense, it's the emergence of DeAndre Swift. He has completely changed their offense now that he's actually pulled his head out of his ass and started to play real football. So, good win for the Bears here in London. The Jags just continue to be a disaster. I don't really have a whole lot to say about the Jags. I mean, they're literally one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I think they're just kind of a dumpster fire right now because there's no easy fix with the Jags. They're paying Trevor Lawrence an astronomical amount of money for the next couple of years, and there's really no way to get out of that. He's just too limited to carry this team. I think Doug Peterson, even though I like Doug Peterson, I don't know what it is with this team. It just doesn't really work. I think he's going to get fired. I think all the coaches will get fired. They're a mess. They are really, really a big-time mess. And like I said, there's real no easy fix for that. Because even if they were to get a high pick, you can't draft a QB because you're paying Trevor Lawrence $1 billion. So they're a mess right now. But a good win for the Bears as they move up to 4-2 now. We can move on to the Bucs at Saints. So this was an absolute beatdown by the Buccaneers. And I really think this game just kind of highlights how bad the Saints are, more so than it shows how good the Bucs are. Because, I give the Bucs credit for sure. They're a legit offense. I have some problems with their defense. They've been kind of banged up, although Winfield's back now. That's obviously massive for them. But when I think of Tampa, I think of their offense because of those high-powered weapons with Mike Evans and Godwin, who I think right now is kind of easily the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL. Very underrated wide receiver tandem because everyone throws out Waddle and Tyreek in Miami, or people throw out the Philly duo with Devonta and A.J. Brown. Those duos are great. But I think Mike Evans and Godwin, honestly, is the best duo in football right now. I mean, Chris Godwin could be the number one receiver for like a third of the league. He is awesome. But here's why I say this was more of showing why the Saints are a shitty team. Because Baker Mayfield threw 3 interceptions, and they still scored 51 points. That's a fucking joke, And going into this year, the Saints defense was looked at as a pretty good unit. I don't know if anyone called the Saints defense elite, but they got some players on that defense for sure. They hung 51 points on you, and the opposing quarterback threw 3 picks. That's completely unacceptable, especially whenever your head coach is a defensive guy. So, if you listened to me earlier in the year, you know that I was never buying into the hype of the Saints. I said, guys, at the end of the day, this is Derek Carr and Dennis Allen. I don't trust those guys. Now you have even a worse option at quarterback with Spencer Rattler, who's a 5th-round rookie who did not have a good game, threw 2 picks in this game. I just think, they're just not a very good team. I don't trust Dennis Allen. I'm predicting he's going to be fired probably before the season is over because the Saints are probably going to lose a lot of games. So I just, find it kind of ironic how quickly the Saints hype train left the station and then just crashed and burned. I mean, when you go back to after they beat the Cowboys and they were 2-0, they were the most hyped up team in the National Football League. You had real people, like real respected media people on ESPN saying that they could be a Super Bowl team after they beat the Cowboys. And now they've gone on to lose their last 4 games straight. So I gotta take my credit there, guys. I told you the Saints were frauds, and that's exactly what they are. Next up, we have Cards at Packers. So like I told you guys about the Cardinals, I do root for the Cardinals. Kyler Murray's my favorite non-Steeler player in the NFL. I've liked Kyler his entire career. So the Cardinals this season, they have been probably the most difficult team for me to predict because I usually tend to give Kyler Murray the benefit of the doubt. I think that he's a lot better than what people give him credit for. But this Cardinals team is just so wildly inconsistent because they live or die by Kyler Murray. The defense is atrocious, and obviously Marvin Harrison went out with a concussion problem. The Cardinals are just kind of a mess right now. So I'm glad that I didn't fall into the trap of picking the Cardinals because you guys know if you listen to my picks, I picked them the first 4 weeks. They went 1-3. Then when I didn't pick them in week 5 against the Niners, they beat the Niners. So I'm glad I didn't fall into the trap of, oh, well, they beat the Niners. They should beat the Packers. I'm glad I didn't. I just went with the Packers here. Yeah, that NFC North is fucking crazy right now because I'm pretty sure the Packers are in last place, but they're 4-2. Like, you look at every other division in the NFL, there's at least one dumpster fire. That's not the case with the NFC North. That is such an incredible division. So the Packers get a big win here, a must win. Next, we had Colts at Titans. Not really a whole lot to say about this one. I went with the Colts here for the simple fact that Will Levis is a fucking disaster, and that was on full display yet again in this game. Like I said, I really don't have a whole lot to say about this one. Not an interesting game whatsoever. This one, on the other hand, was, though, Browns at Eagles, a game that I did watch. The Eagles continue to be one of the most frustrating teams in the NFL for me because they have so much talent on this roster, yet they just, there's something missing about this team. There's something off, and I think it honestly just comes down to the play calling is not great, and I think that all stems from the head coach. I think Nick Sirianni is a fucking clown. That was really on full display with him yelling at the fans. Like, I don't understand where this sense of confidence came from with Nick Sirianni. Like, what the fuck have you achieved in the NFL? Like, you got to a Super Bowl, you didn't win it. I probably could have coached that team that got to the Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni is very quickly becoming what Brandon Staley was on this channel last year. If you were a listener of the Steel City Sports channel last year, you know how much I shit on Brandon Staley. It was pretty much weekly we talked about him because of how big of a fucking disaster he was last year with the Chargers. That's very quickly what Nick Sirianni is turning into this year because I feel like he is the biggest thing holding the Eagles back right now because he's just a fucking idiot. There's really nothing productive that Nick Sirianni brings to the table for the Philadelphia Eagles. He doesn't call offensive plays. He doesn't call defensive plays. He doesn't have any say really in the personnel. He's a bad leader of men, and the biggest way to prove that is Jalen Hurts doesn't even talk to him. There was a report that came out before the season started. Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts didn't really speak to each other last year. Like, that shows you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Whenever you have a quarterback on your team that makes that much money, is clearly your guy, and you can't even talk to him because he doesn't trust you. So the players know he's a moron. We know he's a moron. Eagles fans, he's a moron. And he is holding back this team. I get it. They won this game. But they almost blew it to the biggest mess in the NFL right now, which is Deshaun Watson. If they would have lost this game, I think there's a good chance Sirianni would have been fired. And, there's been reports coming out that, from NFL insiders that they said they think that Nick Sirianni is having a mental breakdown right now. The way he's behaving, shaving the head, screaming at fans. It really seems like something is going on really wrong mentally with Nick Sirianni. He's clearly mentally unstable right now. So, Eagles, good on them for getting the win. I still think the way they play is so weird. It's odd how they play. Jalen has not been playing very well this year at all. But he did have a couple great splash plays, obviously, to A.J. Brown for a touchdown, for Devonta Smith to a touchdown. I don't really get, the criticism people were laying at Jalen Hurts. I admit he's not played good. But when people are guys, his top 2 weapons were gone. What do you want from him? Most quarterbacks in the NFL, not named Mahomes or Josh Allen, if you take away their top 2 receiving threats, especially guys that talented, they're probably going to struggle. So I don't really get that critique of them as he's going to play better down the stretch. I'm still a big believer in Jalen Hurts. He's gone off to a slow start this season, but missing those guys is a big chunk of why that happened, I think. So I think Hurts is going to improve as the year goes on. But overall, I don't trust the Eagles as much as I did, in years prior, just because the head coach is such a liability. And I just don't think the play calling overall from the coaching staff is that great either. So the Eagles get a win here, but, you got to keep in mind, they were 10-point favorites in this game. They were at home. They were getting their guys back from injury. Like, this should have been a dominant statement win for the Philadelphia Eagles on a really, really bad Cleveland Browns team. And they almost blew it. So they're one of the teams that I could just see really, really quickly just self-imploding with how the head coach is acting right now and how the team is just not performing to the level we all know that they can. Not that long ago, this team was in the Super Bowl, and I think that they, I don't know what to do with the Eagles. I like a lot of their players, but it's just weird. Like, you can't deny that. The Eagles have just been a weird team this year. But we can move on now to Texans at Patriots. So Texans just completely curb stomped the Patriots here, but Drake May looked good. Drake May had 3 touchdowns, and it kind of goes into a narrative that I've talked about on this channel a couple times, is I think it's really overrated to sit rookies. Like, we all knew going into the season that you probably had a better chance of winning football games with Drake May at the helm than Jacoby Brissett. Like, Drake May sitting on the bench for those 5 games, watching Jacoby Brissett just suck at football, does nothing for his development. So I really think it's one of the most overstated myths, not only in the NFL, but just in sports in general, just sitting guys early on. Like, everyone wants to point to the Packers thing. Aaron Rodgers, when he got there, sat behind a Hall of Famer in Brett Favre, a multi-time MVP. Jordan Love sat behind Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is a Hall of Fame quarterback and a multi-time MVP. That's not the case with Jacoby Brissett here, with Drake May coming in. So when people point to the Packers thing, it's like, oh, Aaron got time to sit and develop. Jordan got time to sit and develop behind these great QBs. That's because they had a Hall of Famer already on the team. That's why they sat, And I point to another situation, like people bring up Mahomes. Mahomes sat for a year behind Alex Smith. I would argue that that's actually one of the biggest mistakes Andy Reid ever made, was not playing Patrick Mahomes his rookie year, because if we knew Mahomes was going to be if he was that good of a player, you would have had a better chance of winning the Super Bowl that year with Mahomes at the helm than Alex Smith. So that just kind of goes into a little narrative with Drake May. He should have been the starter going into this season. He's just a more talented player in 2024 than Jacoby Brissett, and I think we all kind of knew that, and he displayed that. Even though they got their asses kicked in this game, he showed a lot of upside, throwing 3 touchdowns in this game. But yeah, Houston, I was waiting for like a big, dominant, like standout win for the Texans, because all their other wins earlier in the year, they've been kind of close. Like week 1 against the Colts was really close. Even when they beat the Bills, it was really close. And I was like, when I looked at this roster on paper, there's just so much talent. You have a top 5 QB. I was waiting for like them to just slaughter a team. And the Patriots have a pretty good defense. Not a pretty, I mean, it's a good defense. I would say it's an above average defense. And they got shit on. So I was, finally we got a big dominant performance from the Texans offense. I was waiting for that all year. Next up, we had a big one, Commanders at Ravens. So the Ravens did come out in this one. I told you guys that if the Commanders won this game, then I was going to have to start talking about the Commanders as a legit Super Bowl contender. But even though they lost this game, I still think the Commanders are inching their way into the conversation of that. Jay Daniels was still good in this game. This game came right up to it. It was a good battle between, 2 former Heisman quarterbacks. Always love whenever we see, Heisman matchups. Especially these 2 guys have drawn like so much comparisons to each other. But Jay Daniels and the Commanders, this is not really that big of a deal for me. Losing to the Ravens, the Ravens were in the AFC Championship. They were hosting the AFC Championship game last year. Like, it's not like they blew a game to the Titans or, like the Panthers. Like, they lost to the Ravens. I don't think this is really that bad of a loss for the Commanders. The sky's still the limit, I think, for Jay Daniels going forward. And I think the Commanders right now, at least for me, they're the favorite to win that division. Like, we just talked about how big of a mess the Eagles are. We're going to get to the Cowboys in a little bit here. For me right now, the NFC East, belongs to the Washington Commanders, even though they lost this game. And as for Baltimore, you got to give them a ton of credit. The pairing of Lamar and Derrick Henry has been an absolute success. Ever since they decided to start actually using Derrick Henry, they've been fucking crushing people. They crushed the Cowboys, they crushed the Bills, and then they win this one. Last week they won in overtime against the Bengals, and then obviously they won this game against the Commanders. Derrick Henry has just changed this offense. I mean, I said it going into the year. The pairing of Lamar and Derrick Henry is potentially one of the best. It has the potential to be one of the best duos we've ever seen between a quarterback and a running back. And I think that's starting to really play out right now because you have two Hall of Famers still in their prime. Lamar's like at the peak of his prime. Obviously, Derrick Henry's towards the end, but Derrick Henry is still absolutely in his prime. So they're just like, I don't know how you stop that. Like, I don't know how you game plan for Lamar and Derrick Henry in the same backfield. That's just not fair. So the Ravens getting back on track after getting off to like a slow start because they started off the year 0-2, but they've gone on to win every other game this season. So the Ravens, they're a scary team. And I hate that they're in my division with my Steelers because I don't think we have a chance against them. Next we have Chargers at Broncos. This is another one I don't have a whole lot to say about. I think this game really just highlighted the roller coaster that is Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos. Like, every time it feels like the Broncos start to get some momentum, like after they beat the Bucs, and then last week after they beat, I think they beat the Raiders. Yeah, they beat the Raiders last week. It's like, oh, they're starting to build something there. Like, they're actually looking decent, and then they come out the next week completely flat and just show you what they are. They lose again here to the Chargers. And the Chargers have been really, like, quietly just rattling off wins, I could be wrong. I don't have their schedule in front of me right here, but I think the only loss the Chargers have is to the Steelers. Or no, I think they have another loss. But the Chargers have been like a really quietly good, consistent team this year under Harbaugh. Kind of surprising that's the case because Harbaugh is one of the bigger personalities in the league, but you rarely hear the Chargers ever in the headlines this year. That's kind of weird to me, but they get a good win here in Denver. Next up, we had Steelers at Raiders. So my Steelers got a big win here, 32-13. We had the best performance from Najee Harris of the season. I want to give Najee a lot of credit. This was by far his best game of the season. Like, he had a couple runs where it's like, that's what we drafted you to be, that fucking wrecking ball, Derrick Henry light type player. That's why we took him in the first round. And it's been very, very disappointing to start off this year. And the way he was playing in the games leading up to this year, I was like, I can kind of understand why they didn't pick up his fifth option because, let's just be honest, he's been bad this season. Take this game out, he's been really bad this season. It looks like he runs in slow motion. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but I'm glad to see a bounce-back performance here from Najee, and I'm really hoping it's similar to like what happened with DeAndre Swift, where Swift was really bad the first 4 weeks, then he pulled his head out of his ass and started playing good. I'm hoping that's the case with Najee because we really, really need it. It was really needed in this game. Justin Fields really, really struggled passing the ball in this game. Like, Justin Fields, his inaccuracy problems, I think, were on full display in this game. He had multiple passes where he's just oversailing guys. Like, I kept saying when I was watching it, like, Justin, these guys aren't 8 feet tall. Like, they weren't even close throws. It's not like it could go one way or another. Like, he was completely airmailing people. So Fields' accuracy is going to consistently be a problem. I don't think that's something that's ever going to be fixed, because we're in, year 4, year 5 of Fields now? Year 4 of Justin Fields. Like, his accuracy just kind of is what it is, and it's just not very good. But his running ability, I think, is good enough to still keep him on the field, especially when they're winning games. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in this game. And the Steelers are 4-2. We're hearing chatter now that Russell Wilson might start next week against the Jets. And, I just don't get it. It feels like a random time to change out quarterbacks. Because I'm not saying, Justin Fields has been, amazing or perfect or an MVP or anything. But he's done his job. We're 4-2. We're a good team right now. We have a good shot to make the playoffs this year. Fields, he has limitations, but he also does things that Russell Wilson can't do, like being a really good athlete, like being able to run the ball, get out of spots. That's something that Russell Wilson couldn't do at all in Denver. He couldn't get out of the pocket and play make. And particularly with how bad our O-line is, we need that playmaking with Justin Fields and his legs. So that's something we'll have to monitor. If they do decide to go with Russ before that Jets game happens, I'll come on here and do a video talking about that. But just as, someone who's watched every game this year, I don't know why you would make the change now, because they're 4-2 and he's playing all right. Like, he's doing his job. But got to give the running backs a lot of credit in this one. The defense was really good as well. TJ Watt had another signature performance in this game. He was making plays the entire game. So Steelers get a big win there, just crushing the Raiders, finally having, this is by far our highest scoring game of the season, 32 points. Next we had Falcons at Panthers. Not really a surprising one. The Falcons crushed the Panthers here. Kirk Cousins had a pretty good game. All around, not really a whole lot to take away from that one, as just the Falcons handle their business against the shitty Carolina Panthers. Do want to point out, though, how bad Andy Dalton was in this one. You now are starting to hear chatter of maybe Bryce Young could get his job back. No. Guys, this isn't the NFL. Or excuse me, yeah, it's the NFL. This isn't the NBA. When people talk about tanking when it comes to the NFL, I don't think people realize that's an NBA term. When you're hired as a head coach in the NBA, you're given typically, obviously there's always exceptions, but when you're hired as a head coach in the NBA, you're usually given 3 to 4 years to really, build up your culture, your system with a team. Just look at Chauncey Billups right now with the Blazers. They've been a fucking embarrassment under Chauncey Billups, yet he's still there. This is his 4th year as their coach. You're typically given, unless something really weird happens, with the Bucks with Adrian Griffin, you're typically given a long time to implement your style into a team in the NBA. That is not the case in the NFL. You will get fired very quickly in the NFL if you don't produce. So Dave Canales is a head coach. If he gets fired after this season as a one-and-done head coach, he's probably not going to be hired ever again as a head coach, or at least if he does, it's going to be a long, long time. So this guy's coaching for his career. This is a team that doesn't want to lose. Even though they're not a good team on paper, they have a bad record. In the mind of Dave Canales, he doesn't want to fucking lose games. So whenever people are saying they should tank to get a better pick, that's not how it works in the NFL. These guys are coaching for their life, their jobs right now. So it might be on paper, yeah, throw Bryce Young out there, let him try to develop, and even if he sucks, you can get a better pick. That's not what the Panthers are going to do. They're going to do with who is going to give them the better option at quarterback. They're going to go with who gives them the best chance to win the game. And right now, that's by far and away Andy Dalton over Bryce Young. So I don't get it why there's so many Bryce Young defenders out there. We saw Bryce Young. He got a pretty long sample size. He played his entire rookie year. He played 3 games this year. He's not good. So that's just one of the weird ones. I get it. He was a number 1 overall pick, but people act like they've never seen a bust before. It happens. He's just not very good. So I don't get the clamoring for Bryce Young to come back. Next up, we have Lions at Cowboys. So yeah, this one, not a shocker whatsoever. Again, if you're a longtime listener of me, I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I'm honestly getting sick of having to say it because I say it every time I talk about the Cowboys. And I think people are starting to catch on, whereas last year there was a lot of hype surrounding the Cowboys. I think people know this year this is just not a very good team. The defense is a mess right now. This is the most reliant on Dak they've been in the Dak Prescott era, and he's just not good enough to carry a team. We all know that. That's why they get so much criticism for paying him, the astronomical amount of money they're paying him. The Cowboys are just in shambles right now. I think McCarthy's going to get fired. Jerry Jones doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I don't know. I'm sick of talking about the Cowboys. You guys know my laundry list of grievances with the Cowboys. Bad O-line, worst running game in the league. Dak's too limited. Defense sucks. Coaches don't know what they're doing. I'm not surprised. I will say, though, real quick about the Lions. Sucks what happened to Aiden Hutchinson. That is a real heartbreaking injury because that guy was on pace to be Defensive Player of the Year. And I think the Lions, with Aiden Hutchinson, you could have argued they were the favorite in the NFC this year, the way they were playing. With him gone now, that is such a big loss. just always fucking sucks really bad to see that, especially one that gruesome where I don't know if it was true. I heard reports that his bone was sticking out of his leg, but Fox wouldn't show it. So I don't know exactly happened. Obviously, I was watching the Steeler game when this game was on, so I didn't see live what happened with Hutchinson, but you just hate to see that. It really, really is heartbreaking. So hopefully he recovers well. I heard some chatter for the Lions going forward. I don't want to get too far off into speculation, but I have heard some rumors about they're now starting to ask around about pass rushers. I heard, I was listening to Middlecoff. He was saying maybe they could target a Max Crosby. If the Raiders are going to start blowing things up, they just traded Devontae today, they could get a lot of capital for Max Crosby. And if I'm the Lions, that's something I would be willing to risk the farm on because this is kind of their Super Bowl window right now with all the talent they have. So we'll talk about that more in the future. But for now, really feel bad for Aiden Hutchinson. Hope his recovery goes well. Next up, we have Bengals at Giants. I had this game on, but it was kind of in the background. I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention. If you listen to my predictions, I was multiple times in that video, I was like, why the fuck is this the Sunday night game? Because usually the Sunday night game is, at least on paper, supposed to be, one of the better matchups of the week. And this matchup just did not excite me whatsoever. Joe Burrow had a sweet run in this one, but outside of that, there just wasn't very much exciting about this game. Daniel Jones kind of revealed what he was, ultimately not a shocking outcome for me. And of course, we have last night's game, Monday Night Football. One of the most atrociously officiated games that I've ever seen in my life, legitimately. And you guys know, I try to be the guy that doesn't focus on reffing or, refs and flags and all that, because I think throughout the course of a game, there's going to be good calls and bad calls that benefit both sides. They usually tend to cancel out. But the ones in this game were so fucking embarrassing for the sport of football. We always talk about players getting cut. We talk about coaches getting fired when they suck. Why don't refs get penalized? I don't understand that whatsoever. Refs should be fined for shitty calls, and those refs last night should have been fired because I don't know what it is, what they have to do, why it was a fucking dick measuring contest with the refs where they had to stick their fucking nose into every play. I mean, it was just terrible. It was really just a shameful embarrassment for the National Football League last night, what we saw from those refs. They should all either be fined their year's salary or just fucking fired. And literally the worst call I've seen in my entire life was that roughing the passer call on Aaron Rodgers. That was, I don't even have words for that one. That was disgraceful. The Javon Kinlaw stuff, throwing the flag there. In that moment in the game, it's that tight, and you're going to throw a flag on him for saying something to you. Grow up. I can't stand when the refs do this shit, where they just take over the game. As for, the actual play, Josh Allen really impressed me in this one. He didn't have, a signature MVP performance, but he was making plays the whole night. I thought Aaron actually played pretty well as well. He had one of the greatest throws I've seen of this entire season to, I believe it was Lazard. He threaded the ball through, a defender's arm. You got to go check that throw out. That was insane. Of course, he had the Hail Mary. But the Jets, this is kind of what I thought was going to happen. Yeah, you got rid of Nathaniel Hackett as the play caller, but it's still the same team out there, So I think the offense looked a little more competent. I think Aaron actually looked a lot better in this game than in the games prior. But firing Saleh and demoting Hackett doesn't really fix the structural flaws of this team. The fact that you're relying on a 40-year-old Aaron who's out of his prime, even though he looked good in this one, he's still very limited. The personnel's not limited, or the personnel was limited. Hopefully, for their sake, Devontae can help fix that, and I think he will, and we're going to talk about that in my next video coming up here. But I don't know with the Jets. They're sitting at 2-4 right now. The Devontae thing kind of feels like a desperation move. I just don't think the Jets really know what they're doing right now. The Bills get a really big win here. This was kind of a must-win for the Buffalo Bills, because if they lose this one, they go down. They would have been on a 3-game losing streak, so that's a big win for the Bills. The kickers were both really bad in this one as well. Both Zerline and Tyler Bass had some pretty big misses. So kind of a messy game, a sloppy game with that and the flags. Not a great watch, but that was it for all my Week 6 reactions. So like I said, now sitting on a record of 61-38 on the season. So definitely let me know down in the comments, some of your favorite picks for the upcoming week. How did your picks do for this week? If you made it this far, really appreciate you listening to me ramble here. Please like and subscribe.